You got me this time. Okay, I'd like to call the order of the Village of Lansing Planning Board meeting to order for Monday, May 13th, 2024 at 7:05 p.m. Pat is not with us tonight, so I will appoint Yamila as a voting member for this evening. Jim is remote and online, but he is a voting member this evening, so. With that, first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for April 30th, 2024.
I move to accept the minutes of April 30th of 2024.
Motion by Lisa.
I second.
Second by Yamila, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the public comment period. This is an opportunity for anybody to bring up an item that's not already on the agenda for this evening.
Susan Ainsley, covering for the Board of Trustees.
Hey, Susan.
I'm like,
I'm Carla Marceau. I'm here as an observer for the community party.
Hey, Carla. Hearing no other comments, I'll entertain a motion to close the public comment period.
I move.
Motion by Yamila,
Second.
second by Lorraine, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next item on the agenda is discussion of Lansing Meadows extension detail, or deadline, not detail, sorry. A couple things first. One, we went back through the minutes, so two administrative things. One, we went back through the minutes and found out that we never closed the public comment period when we previously approved the extension to the, or the extension, the amendment to the special permit. So just administratively, we do have to close that public comment period, so I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing, not public comment period.
I move that we close the public hearing,
Motion
or do we, is there a specific date?
Just a special
Okay,
amendment.
for the special amendment regarding Lansing Meadows.
Motion by Lisa,
Second.
second by Lorraine, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next item on the, or next piece of that administratively is that we do have to set a public hearing, or set a date to open a public hearing to discuss potentially revoking the special
Yeah,
permit.
let's have Mike Scott go through what's happened or not happened since May 1st.
Okay, since there was two deadlines that Eric agreed to for Lansing Meadows, one of them was by December 15th. Those deadlines were to have the area that was known as Phase 2 cleaned up and basically safe for the public. That was done, I approved that, I went out and took a look at it, did a good job of that. The second was to install a do not enter one-way signs for the roadway that's there, and that was done and installed. So basically with those two items being met, the temporary CFCs for buildings 2, 20, 26, and 32, which are the four existing buildings down there, they were extended to May 1st, 2024. And then May 1st, 2024, there was a couple more deadlines. One was to take care of all the items John Courtney needed. Some of it briefly would be some of the sewer issues. I believe there was a manhole that needed to be extended or raised. And then there was repairing of the sidewalk. At the time of an email, which I sent to all of you, what had been done, the sewer, none of the sewer had been done. There had been some contact between Eric and John. I don't know what those private discussions were. I just know that the items weren't taken care of at the time. Another item was to have the sewer and sidewalk easements approved. I believe Natalie and Peter have been working with Eric's attorney.
Yeah, I've been talking with Jim Messenger. I think those are like 99% of the way there, so I wouldn't be concerned about those being wrapped up in a timely manner.
Another item on the list was to finish the phase 1 tree planting, which to my knowledge, the only thing were left were there were 3 trees that were on the north side of building 2 that still needed to be done. There was a lot of discussion in the past about whether they were going to be lilac trees, whether they were going to be no trees, but it went back to the original formula of having 3 trees. Offhand, I don't know the type of tree it is, but there were supposed to be 3 trees and there are none there. And if those conditions were not met by May 1st, the temporary CFCs for 2, 20, 26, and 32, if the deadline was not met, then they would be revoked. They weren't going to be extended, and what I've done is I've sent, Eric, I've sent them a stop work order for those 4 buildings, with the condition that it could still work on the items that need to be done on this list, but nothing else. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
So one of the results of failing to meet the deadline is that he's subject to action under section 145-59D11, which is the revocation of a special permit. It says in all instances, a special permit may be revoked by the board after public hearing if it is found and determined that there has been a substantial failure to comply with any of the terms, conditions, limitations, and requirements imposed by said special permit. Whichever board was given the original power to grant the special permit is the board that has authority to revoke the permit according to the conditions set forth in this chapter. So at this time, the board has to decide whether or not it wants to set that public hearing to determine whether they want to revoke the special permit.
So not voting to revoke, not
No,
voting to revoke the
voting to
special
set
permit,
a
just
public
voting on whether or
hearing.
not to set a public hearing to discuss
Yes, the
revoking the
revocation.
special permit. So I will entertain a motion to set a public hearing for, when's the next board meeting?
The 28th, or the day after Memorial Day, whatever that is, I think it's the 28th.
28th. So I would entertain a motion to set a public hearing to discuss the revocation of the special permit for the 28th.
For discussion of that.
Yep, further discussion of it.
Yep, hold on, Eric.
I so move.
Okay, motion by Lisa.
Second.
Second by Lorraine, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we will get the mailings out and everything we need to do to discuss opening the public hearing, so. I know that you're here, Eric. I would recommend, so you're on the agenda, if you have things you want to say tonight, you're free to say them.
But I will say that probably the best time to say them would be at the next board meeting when the public hearing's open.
Because probably anything you say tonight, you'll have to repeat at that meeting, but
If there's anything you want to discuss right now, you're happy to.
Sure.
You're welcome to discuss it.
I'd like to. So a few things, just going through, I had requested earlier to have a private developers meeting with, the chair and the vice chair, which, I've done since 1998 to try and bring people up to speed where we are instead of doing an open forum and take waste time. So why don't I do that now? Because I know you prefer not to do that. So, going back to the items that Mike Scott just went through, let me see if I can go through these things. The tree planting goes back to the plans. We had a few of these updates. The 3 open items we had in the tree planting were, I'm not sure, Lisa, you can help me pronounce these, Syringa, vulgaris, purple lilacs.
Why just say lilacs, but.
I'm going from what, so that was sent, the whole plan was sent to David Fernandez at, Cayuga Landscaping, and he's the one who took care of all my planting. We highlighted all the open things I had. So David last summer took that upon himself, and he says, look, the purple lilacs don't do well in shade, because they just don't grow. It's the north side of the building where they're slotted for. He substituted 3 Spirea Renaissance or bridal wreath Spirea. So he,
But those
are
are
shrubs.
Those are shorter, well, they're a whole different level, but.
well, that's what the plan called out for. They were number 2 pots, so the 2 things in the plan, number 2 pots, and one said the lilacs.
Well, let me just back up a little bit. Are these the ones that are on the north end of the building closest to the fire station?
Yes.
Because originally, they were, I thought,
Trees, not
coniferous, actually,
They were not.
originally.
They were,
And then you took, as I recall, you said, oh, I have a tenant, and she would really prefer to be able to look out and see the birds. Of course, there's no birds there, but there was something in that regard, and we sort of let it go a little bit. And then we came back to it, said, no, we really, and that's when you went with the lilacs. I actually think there's plenty of some there, but that's, I certainly would defer to David.
so let's let Eric.
But I don't know, I don't remember that past the
This
lilacs.
is part of the reason why I would
Yeah.
prefer to defer conversation until
For
the
the
public
public
hearing, so
hearing.
we have time to pull those planting
Right.
plans, know exactly what
That's
types
I'm
of things
sorry,
we're
yeah,
talking
Yeah,
about.
thank
so I
You can
would,
get
yeah.
letters from whoever that you want about what exactly they said. David Fernandez wants to write something, just so we can have all the information that is accurate and correct, rather than trying to recall from memory what plans were.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that would just be beneficial for everybody, rather
I
than,
mean, There were lilacs on there.
Okay.
But he said there's two things on the detailed plans. One shows number 2, what size they are, and one says like 6 feet. And he goes, never in his 50 years has he ever seen a lilac in the trade. They don't build them that way. They're 1.5 gallon buckets, and that's what he planted. So that's what's there against the building that was planted.
he's put them in.
It was planted last July.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that doesn't, I guess the thing, let's look into it, because I remember there were trees specified for there, and lilacs are shrubs, not trees.
Well, whatever the
So
plant, the
we'll
approved
figure that out.
planting plan said is what we're going to go with, but Mike took photos, and there was nothing planted there. I think there was maybe one thing planted.
I'll supply the planting plan and all that.
Yeah, we'll look at whatever the planting plan
I'll show it
said.
next week, but those were from last July.
Okay,
So
Okay.
they're lilacs against the building. Sorry.
Okay.
But I'll bring all that.
yeah, like I said, I'm just
That's the side facing the.
the road.
Facing the fire station or facing
No,
the
facing
road?
Oakcrest.
Drive down Oakcrest.
North side.
Yeah,
This end, it's the end of the building.
so that was, I mean, that addresses the plants, the one. The sidewalk, again, I want to sit down and talk to everybody here. The sidewalk was installed in April of 2022. It was in service in May of 2022. Again, I'll get all this out there. We had a very large escrow in place. It was inspected, it was reviewed, it was accepted, and my deposit was returned in August of 2022. So we're 2 years later looking for something that came. I want to sit down and talk to you about that, but I'll just bring out the facts.
My response to that will be that it has not been accepted by the village, dedication has not been taken. You requested an extension to the special permit, and in doing so, we could add conditions to it. So had the sidewalk been dedicated and accepted in 2022, we'd have a 1-year warranty in there, and you probably wouldn't be dealing with the sidewalk, but you asked for an extension.
Yeah, I'm
You
not-
had the ability to add conditions.
I'm not
Yeah.
denying it, I'm just saying I want
Yeah.
to sit down and talk to them.
Yeah.
because- So apparently there was spalling.
Yes.
John called out spalling. I had concrete people come in, and they said, it's not spalling, it's from the salt from the road overspraying, it's the surface. of it.
Okay.
Spalling going much deeper, so I just want to have a discussion. That's all. So that deals with the sidewalk, Mike, I think, so that was the planting, that was the sidewalk, and the other issue, I think, was the sewer line. So the sewer line, again, we've had a number of discussions with John. It's a sewer line that runs behind the buildings between the BJ's property. It's a single line that goes to BJ's. It's a private line for the gas station attendant. It's one toilet. So we've had a number of discussions. We were trying to get our contractor to move it. The issue we ran into is that it goes under the detention basin that's built. The structure is in place, fully operating. For us to move the line the way John wanted to, we'd have to dig up the entire retention basin. It's very deep in that corner, so we're looking for other alternatives to that. And John was, he believes he wants the 10 feet between the sewer structure and the building in case it ever fails, so we can get through it. So I went to our engineers and I had them draw up a number of other plans. They finally came back and said, Eric, this is a private lateral. No municipalities want to take dedication on private lateral. They take of sewer lines, not private laterals. He goes, this shouldn't even fall under that. So I'm not sure why we're talking about that. So I wanted a discussion. It is a private lateral, like all our other laterals on the property we maintain. So from that point of view, it wouldn't be an easement. So the building's not under construction, it's not a violation of anything. I understand John wants to move it, but I don't know why, and everybody told me, I'm not sure who is in charge of that, if it's John or Brent or you guys, but the dedication of that would not, my understanding, would never happen in just about any municipality. On top of that, my engineers had other designs that could work, which that sewer line up where the structure John was indicating is like 4 feet deep. It's easy to deal with that. It's when you go to the other end, you got trench boxes, we got to rip up the retention basin and everything else. So there's ways of dealing with that I want to discuss. I wasn't trying to walk away from responsibilities on here. I was just trying to find a way that we don't have to, rip up the site at this time. So that's really what it comes back to. In the manhole, I believe that John, one was referring to was that one, because I asked him again. But if it's not, we're happy to move. I don't know what manhole, but I think it was that one, because it was near where the stream came down, he wanted it raised. So we're happy to do that, I just don't know what it is, but at the same point, we're happy to do that. So that really addresses the open issues that are out there. And I have the plans from, we're on the plans for the things, just to jump back quick to the lilacs. The original approval had no trees on that end. We came back, I think Lisa, you suggested for driving back, it'd be nice to have something between the building and there. And that's where it came on the last extension we did, and we came back to doing lilacs there. So it's all in history of the notes. I mean, I don't want to really challenge anybody here, but I just wanted to bring the facts up, and that's why I was trying to ask before you maybe set the public hearing, we can bring all this stuff forward instead of going through this.
Well, I think it's important to have the public hearing just to give everybody a chance to hear and listen to this. Then no one would have been notified today that this was being discussed. That's why we send out the mailing, so everyone can have a chance to be here.
Okay.
So that's just why we wanted the public hearing rather than just an agenda item, so we can get all the facts and have everybody here and present.
Well, I think it's important too for the full board to hear all the,
Yeah.
too. So I mean, because, we work as a group, and we all have a vote, so I think it's important that we all hear the same message from you.
Right, and part of, Lisa, when I was asking for the developers meeting, because we can't have a quorum, that's why we've always done it.
That's right.
We've always done it with the chair and the vice chair, just to bring you up to speed where we are, just so you're aware of what's going on, instead of waiting to the actual planning board meeting.
But again, I think,
And so we have not done that since I took over.
Yes, I
to
would
be the
say-
chair of the board, so that's something that I didn't want to do moving forward. To Lisa's point, I think it's important for the whole board to hear everything and not have
That's fine.
any closed door, and so my alternative was, you can write a letter to the board, again, to discuss, not in the meeting, it's all, part of the public record and available, but, that's something that I've changed since I started to do
Every
this.
municipality does it differently. I've had a number of them do it, a number of them, I guess some haven't, but that's fine.
we've stopped having actually those sidebar meetings. It's just proven to be a little better for everyone to hear the same stuff at the same time. It's just been kind of a better practice, we feel.
Okay.
I will work on getting either a letter from John explaining items or ask him to join us.
Meeting, yeah, that would be helpful. I was going to ask.
I just have one quick question. I know we don't want to. Have you lined up a contractor for doing the second phase yet?
I've got a contractor I've got somebody who's interested in the 6 units, and they want to use their contractor, so that's what I'm working on.
And then can we also get Mike the sewer plan? I think it would be good for us to know what laterals we're talking about, what the specs were, any as-built that we have, just so we're all clear of what line is at issue here.
Yep, and unfortunately, I'm not up to speed on.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Right.
John would be the one to talk to you about.
But that's probably the most concerning.
I think that's the
To
biggest
me,
piece.
that is the most concerning.
Yeah.
Because I also want to know what the impact on the current residents of all this is. That's something that's really, I want to
And the
know.
sewer line, Lisa?
About all of this. I mean, what is the impact of a decision we make? How will that trickle down to the people that are living there? And who, became tenants in good faith, and this is now their home. I just want to know what the impact will be on them.
And I'll make sure some of that, but he can definitely share that from the village's perspective at least.
Yes.
At the next meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And when will you
And then the,
public hearing?
So day after Memorial Day.
28th of May, Tuesday, 28th, May 28th.
and I would also request, regarding the sidewalks falling, Eric, you mentioned that your person said it's not that, but clearly somebody here has looked at
John believes
that.
it.
So I'd like to get some clarity on, the judgment of whether it's falling or not. I'm assuming that it is, otherwise we wouldn't have put it on there, but.
Yeah, John has said on a few occasions that's what he believes it is. I would assume if salt was such an issue, all the village sidewalks would look like that.
Yeah.
Would somebody tell me what's spalling?
I myself did not know.
Spalling is where you have a mixture of concrete that might be a little bit too much
Oh, okay,
with water, and that way, when it evaporates, you end up having pock marks in the end.
Yeah.
It becomes very brittle and brushes out.
got
It
it.
seemed like flaking.
Yeah,
And
so that's called spalling.
It's called
I have
spalling.
certainly seen it, yes.
Yeah, it starts breaking apart more, it goes deeper and deeper.
It's a lousy batch of concrete, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's one of the reasons when we do spec documents, we specify testing of concrete before it gets poured.
That's interesting.
Yep, it's usually in the specs. And then if it's in your specs, then you have recourse to tell your contractor, no, you did this wrong.
Yeah.
Come back and redo it without incurring more cost. It's not in your specs.
Interesting to know.
Well, thanks for giving us a precursor, at least we know things
Thank
to
you. Yeah.
look into and have some working knowledge for the next meeting. It'll be helpful.
I can supply anything you need to, if you, anything in the sewer line, I have all the drawings and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that'd
I'll get together with John this
be, yeah.
All right, the sooner you can get us stuff, the better, right, so that you can digest it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
and timeline of,
Of
what
everything,
things
yeah,
happen.
very clear timeline.
Very clear timeline, yeah, because I don't think we can make a good decision without an understanding of the timeline.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll bring it up at the next meeting, and we'll open the public hearing and discuss.
Great.
Good.
Thanks, thank you.
Okay, good.
All right.
Hey, next item on the agenda is discussion of tree law changes. And we have a guest with us here tonight to help us through, so, I don't know, do you mind just sharing your name and what you do, and then we can.
Do you want me to stand or not?
It'll probably, yeah, you can come sit at the table with us if you want, the mic will pick you up better that way.
while.
I mean, if you want to stand, you can, but,
Not sure.
we'll be here for a while.
You can sit next time here.
My name's Dan Siegel. I own the Plantsman Nursery in Lansing and have done that for about 18 years and have been working with landscapes and horticulture for basically my whole working adult life, 30-some years. And Emil and I have talked about trees, and we've talked about some trees in this room, specifically in relation to a project a year or two ago, maybe that was last year, on Black Gin. And really, to be perfectly honest, I'm a little skeptical that I can add a whole lot of specifics that will stick in the context of how you guys handle trees. But I do have strong opinions about what gets planted, when and where, and why. And that was sort of what Emil and I have been talking about for a little while, and that was, I think, the pretext for why maybe I'm here.
Yeah, no, I think that obviously what gets planted and when, I think there's a lot of the why, so, those opinions that you just mentioned you have, I think. We know that you took a look at the tree law that we have out there and left some comments and stuff, and those prompted some other questions by us too, that we were hoping, you could kind of share some of your.
I think those were only in our back and forth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And those are, I'm happy to share those comments, but.
Sure, yeah, no.
But they're not necessarily the same comments I would make, at a meeting, but maybe they are.
Sure,
I think it's just like more of a, one of the examples is, as we talk about, that Emil shared was we had, in the code, we, have this concept of, things at mature height, and, after your discussion and, with Emil's experience too, okay, well, you're never gonna reach that, like, that's the theoretical maximum height, you're never gonna get that here because of, and so, we discussed maybe changing that, 50% of mature, height, or 80%, or something like that, so I think those comments and discussions that you and Emila had prompted some of that, but,
That's
Yeah.
good.
I don't know if you looked like you had a comment, I wasn't sure if you.
No, I was just, having gone through all this together, where we kind of hit a sticking point, there's a couple of big questions, and one of the big questions that we have that we hope you can enlighten us with is an appropriate number of trees for a given acre. And I think we're falling on the side of, we need to think of commercial spaces differently than residential spaces. in terms of the number of trees that we require, and partly because, commercial spaces, they have usually much larger building sizes, and there's, some sort of minimum parking.
Parking lots.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's the, the right-of-ways and that kind of thing, so
Yeah.
I think we've landed on, well, we'll subtract some of those things, not the building size, but we just said
No, just
the minimum parking amount, plus the right-of-way,
Yeah.
because they can't put trees in their minimum parking, and they can't
Yeah.
put trees in the right-of-way. So we'll remove that subtract that from the size of the lot, and then what we're left with is, how much space we have to cover. So some sense of, if you're looking at 1 acre with a commercial building and some parking on it, how many trees is appropriate? And if you're looking at 1 acre in a residential area, again, how many trees is appropriate? Is there a buffer from the house that we should try to always maintain? So there's a quantity question to kind of right-size this law. And then there's a quality question that goes along with it, because we have some language in here that says something like this percent coniferous, this percent deciduous.
Yeah.
And then there's also in the chart, which, we don't have here today.
I'm sure that I don't have all that here, right?
No, the chart's not in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful.
Or I can share it.
For sure.
Yeah, share it, that'd be good.
Yeah, the chart has like, here's a number, we have a number of units, or unit equivalencies. So we wanted to make sure that our unit equivalencies made sense.
Yeah.
And, we have the ability to accept shrubs, a number of shrubs in exchange for a number of trees. But how do we accommodate for that? Because, you plant a 2-inch caliber oak tree versus you plant, 4 little boxwoods, they're never gonna be the same thing. So how do we figure out that equivalency? So we can tackle these one at a time, but those are kind of the big questions.
That's a lot. But I mean, I deal with this stuff all the time, so I think about these things a lot. And one example would be if you look at commercial landscapes, just say right around here, you'll see a pretty wide range of how they're treated and how they're handled. And whether you're looking at overall acreage, or, I mean, the way we actually look at it in reality is planting spaces. So you might have, one parcel might have 1 acre and another parcel might have 1 acre, but the planting spaces may be laid out very differently, very narrow. And, I mean, we were, the Art House building downtown, we were asked to go bid on that planting a couple years ago. And and there were like 43 trees spec'd for that property, and there wasn't a space wider than, I mean, I was worried we couldn't even get a bobcat into the spaces. And these were all supposed to get oaks and maples. And I look at those trees now, some of them are doing okay, they're just stunted and sitting there. So, I think in terms of quantifying that stuff, this is where I realize for you guys, it's hard to get into, I think you're trying to avoid a case-by-case program, and yet a lot of these cases are different, and that's the sticking point. And we deal with that all the time. When we were dealing with the property on Black Chin, there was a spec for a certain number of trees to be planted, and I think that was mostly because the original plan called for trees, is my recollection. But it turned out that there was bedrock within 9 inches of the surface, and plus, from an erosion control standpoint, I personally felt like shrubs and other things would have been better. So that's where that question of equivalencies, I thought would have been perfect in that scenario, and I think we did that on a case-by-case type of basis, but I mean, it's interesting to hear how you guys are dealing with that, and, I'm not necessarily gonna always offer the, opposing perspective on that in terms of practicality, but there are lots of projects that we see go out to bid, some of which come from planning boards as required plantings, where I think that the plantings are, sort of strangely specified. And I believe that a lot of those come from having strange requirements, which, it sounds like that's what you're trying to resolve.
They hobble us instead of actually, so do you have any suggestions how to get around that?
Well, I'm still not 100% clear on like the entirety of what you work with. I don't really feel like I've seen that all in one place yet. But I would be happy to, go through either some of those specific things tonight, or we could come up with a more targeted way to go about it, but I mean, if there's things that are like chronically difficult for you guys that don't go well, those would be the ones that might be good to start with.
Well, there were two things that sort of started us down this path, and one was a clear-cut situation here that we were just, all sorts of people were pretty shocked by, and we didn't have anything in place to prevent that. And the other is just, I don't know, what was the other, lost my train of thought. So that was one of the main things, and then just that the fact is, we also had, at the McGuire situation, we wanted them to plant some buffering, and they didn't have room, as you said, so we thought, okay, and he's the one that brought up a tree bank. I think it was John Snyder or somebody, at which point we said, gee, you know, that's what, so between those two things, we said, you know, we really need to get on tree law, and one of our trustees at the time was very interested in this, and so developed this.
Okay, that's how this,
Yes, just so, and it's perhaps a little more academic than some of us maybe are, but, you know, we're delighted that we have it. We have
Yeah.
some protection here. It's just, we've had now, what, two situations? One, a neighbor of mine, actually, in a residential situation, and one, a commercial situation, and we realize we need to be revising some things here.
you have something that's consistent.
And I think one of the things we've come to is that it doesn't have to be an ISA certified arborist who approves everything, that a landscape architect, or is it certified landscape architect? What do you think about
Landscape
that?
I don't know who should approve that.
Well, here's the thing,
And what do you think about that is what I wanted to ask you.
so who are the list of professionals that we should be able to approve?
That we could say, we can trust you to know
And
what you're
50
doing.
years from now, if it's a whole new set of people in this
Right.
conversation, that it would still hold up at that
Right.
point. Well, I think one of the problems with landscape architects approving things is they're not really on the hook ever. The people that are on the hook for these plantings are the people who put the plants in the ground. And that's a warranty type situation, sort of
Interesting.
commonly, you know, at work. So I don't know, that's sort of a universal thing, is that landscape architects can specify and write plans, and then and this is why I become such a, excuse me, but a pain in the ass to work with on projects sometimes, is because if I'm the one that's holding a warranty for planting,
And it's
and I don't like the plants that are going in, I have to say something at that point, because then why am I holding the warranty? And so I think if you, you know, that doesn't mean that landscape contractors are always the right people to approve those things either.
Right, because there's a lot of
But-
landscape contractors who are just checking a box, and.
Yeah, it goes all ways, but I'm not so sure that, I mean, it almost seems like you'd be better off having someone in your, like a board position, that doesn't have to be certified in any one of those things, but someone that represents your, I don't know what I'll call
Our
it, your
interests.
protocols and your interests. And I don't think it needs to be a landscape architect, I really don't. I mean, it would be helpful if you had that perspective in drafting this, and it would be helpful if you had that ability to, you might say that, you know, maybe there's a member of your board that, you know, has that credential, but I wouldn't say that that's the only perspective I would recommend, is that of a landscape architect, nor of an arborist, because arborists don't really do as much planting. They're dealing with existing trees, so that's the tricky part with all
Yeah,
this, is that.
and the tricky thing is there's no, with both arborists and landscape architects, those are state level certifications, so that you know that they've had a certain amount of training and hold, they have a responsibility to their title and to their certification to do certain things a certain way. We don't have that with landscape contractors, so we have.
Not really, you
Yeah.
don't have the same level of certification, but you also don't have that, as far as I know, in a board type of format. I mean, I doubt that there's too many boards, town boards, that have someone that's specifically designated within the board to approve those things, or maybe that's the board as a
Right.
whole.
It's the board as a whole.
It would
I mean,
have to be, because the board is not, it's not a static situation, you know.
Right? Turns over.
It turns over, and the village is just not large enough
Yeah,
to have a
we're
dedicated
the
person
kind of, yeah.
who does that, so that's the sticky thing. In some other municipalities, there's a, you know, a natural environment kind of committee that reviews those things, but we don't.
No, we don't,
have
we
that.
aren't really, we aren't sort of set.
Tree commission or something like that.
Yeah,
Tree commission.
no, some of the ones that I've looked at in terms of other things have tree commissions, other tree law codes I've looked at.
Yeah.
They, you know, but we're in kind of a different league, we're very tiny here, you
Well, and
know.
I'm not in favor of adding layers of anything to these kinds of
Right.
things, but I do feel like if the information and the approval process, I mean, I'm in lots of situations where I feel like the people that are either designing or approving certain things, it's clear that they don't know. And they're still specifying trees that most people wouldn't plant here for like for the last 40 years.
So-
And that happens still. So that's the scary part.
One of the things we've talked about is having an approved list of things that are appropriate in our area, because, yeah, we don't have any dirt here, it depending, especially if you're on the downhill side.
Yeah.
I can attest to that.
Yeah, certainly.
And so some things just aren't gonna work. I
Yeah.
mean, and so maybe, would that be something we should, if we had a list that we reviewed periodically with someone like you that is familiar?
You know what could be a really fun idea would be to solicit from 3 or 5 or 7 people that you choose, you know, David Fernandez, I mean, people that are doing these things on a regular basis, and ask them for their list of their top 10 or 20 favorite trees that they are, say, you know, consider the most reliable, because that's really what we're after in these situations, is we want them to work. The warranty period, honestly, as of 1 year, a lot of times plants will live past the warranty period
Yeah,
and
that's
still
the
die.
second, yeah, I know.
But there are lots of times that, you know, that's, well, yeah, so I think you could ask a handful of people for their, and then from that, you could sort of consolidate a preferred planting list, and that list could get revised every 3 years.
Well, and that's what we've been talking about, right, is not making it right, so we've got our local law, but in order to change local law, there's a process, right? But an appendix that we revisit yearly, or however often we can go and do, and we had also, just to build off what you had said a little bit there too, there's, you know, a specific section here for plantings on roadways, and should that be a subset of, you know, recommended trees versus, or something,
And
maybe it's
parking
entirely
lots,
different, be
yeah.
like, no, you shouldn't put these in your yard, however, they're great along, you know,
Yeah.
road frontage or things like that, so.
I think you'd get the same, I think you'd get that level of information from people, I mean, I could give you that information, David would give you that information, because we're in that position all the time.
Yeah.
And if a client says, I need a planting out by the road, we're definitely not recommending the same things as if they're asking for a nice, you know, shade garden planting in the backyard.
Right.
So you could get into that level of detail.
I think, and right, what we're doing too, and obviously, we don't, you know, we don't want any, right, we want, if somebody puts a tree in somewhere or some planting, we want it to live too, we don't want, you know, we don't want it to die after a year, we don't want anyone to.
Yeah.
We want it to go on the ground, we want it to.
Yeah.
There you go, that's great, it's not always gonna happen, but,
Yeah, so whatever information, and I think that's kind of just something that
that we've been working more towards with everything we do, whatever information we can have in the appendix or available to either, you know, a landowner or a developer or, you know, somebody putting plantings in that will make their lives, you know, easier or more just kind of steady from project to project, you know, if we can get that somewhere, great for everybody.
Yeah, the consistency would be great. I think, you know, you might, I mean, you maybe already have this, but you might end up with certain, you know, here's our list for a homeowner who cleared some land, and you're gonna say, we'd like you to replant X number of trees based on an acreage principle. But here's a different list for someone who says, let's say, even commercial planting.
Yes,
Yeah.
parking lot.
It's gonna be different, you know, I mean, I think it's realistic, you know, just getting the raw data initially will be, I don't know, 3/4 of the effort, and then parceling that out into sub-lists, and it doesn't have to be that complicated, you could also have a list of things that you don't want people to plant.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think we already.
And we
a lot
had
of that
discussed
exists,
that,
yeah.
and you touched on one other thing too, that we had talked about, right, there's, you know, there's the commercial piece of it, there's residential, there's along roads. The other thing that, you know, we've been pushing for too, and Cayuga Med did a little bit, parking lot trees, and I suspect that would be, you know, a little bit different than other things too, just because of the nature of how they get planted and what they're surrounded by, you know, cars and heat islands and things like that, so,
Can't block things.
yeah.
And some, you know, it's like, we did the Purity landscape years ago, and we were required by, I think the city, required us to plant like maple trees along the parking lot, and presumably it was for shade, for cars in the parking lot. And we were like, you want maple trees, like right on Meadow Street? And they, one by one, died.
Of course.
Every year, another one died, and now I think there's 0 of 6 left. And the plants that made it, you know, they're okay, that was a specific thing, so that's where you guys probably want to be careful too, is you don't want people to feel restricted. You don't want people to feel like you're telling them what to do.
Right.
That's
Be broad
So the
enough,
list is to be long enough and broad enough, people feel like they have a choice.
Yeah.
And whether it's, you know, there's a lot of attention being paid to trees now, but, I don't know, shrubs, grasses for erosion control, I don't know, trees, you know, trees are one part, and if the emphasis is just on trees, I do think it's, I mean, unless there's, for example, a shade goal,
Right.
then, okay, yes, you're gonna get it from trees, but I don't know how that really, I don't know on your side of it, how that really works when people have to plant trees.
Shrubs, I mean, shrubs have been a big conversation.
Yeah, there's so many shrubs equal to trees.
Yeah, so,
And
so
it's-
and that's that chart that I pulled up, and this is, I think this is, I can zoom in a little bit more if you want to. I think this is the bigger.
Is there more to the right of that, or no?
No, no.
Okay.
But so this is what was originally come up, right, when we talk about the, you know, tree density on a piece of property and the density that you have to reach, here's the things that you can do to reach that density, and this has been, you know,
Well, this-
topic for discussion, and Yamila brought up some, you know, it doesn't take into account like,
Yeah, multi-trunk trees,
Multi-trunk.
right, yeah.
or what species it is.
Yeah.
And we've had people ask us to protect buckthorn
Oh,
on
my God,
projects.
there's no
It's
need.
like,
Yeah, no.
someone, that's one of those things where you're like, this is gonna be complicated, but, you know, if you don't specify,
Right.
Right,
then someone could take that to mean that,
right.
Yes,
right off there. And,
yes.
but regardless of that, I mean, I guess the conversation with Eric was interesting to me, because the idea of a 2-gallon.
Lilac maple tree.
Yeah, there was a lot of information there, I was like, oh God, this is
yeah.
complicated, but, because, you know, it's all stuff we deal with all the time, and I
Right.
really can't believe that it's worth your time to micromanage, like,
Yeah.
his compliance on a couple of little plants next to a building that, it's just hard for me to believe that you guys want to, like, maybe that's part of why you're trying to
This is.
automate it a little bit.
Generally, we're more concerned, right, there's beautification things, you know, but a lot of what we deal with from property is buffering from other properties, or buffering from, you know, if you've got a nice eggplant there, we don't want you to just have the building with chain link around it, we'd like that to be buffered from view for aesthetic, and those, so that's what we deal with a lot more. No, we generally, if you want to plant a 2-gallon
Lilac tree.
tree around you, that's fine.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I understand
I
the
do
context.
too, and they spread. One of the things that's also in here that I think we've been looking at too is it says, at least 25% of new trees shall be understory, less than 40 feet mature height, and at least 25% shall be overstory, greater than 40 feet. And we're thinking, maybe that isn't necessary to get into that.
Yeah, like, how granular do we need to be here? Like, we clearly don't want someone to plant a lilac shrub and call it a tree. We clearly
Yeah.
don't want someone to take down, you know, a beautiful old oak and say, I've planted 4 of these little scrawny
Understory,
things,
I got lots of
understory.
understory now.
Yeah, I mean, the goal of that really for us is to have, you know, some diverse set of things on your property that, you know, we don't, right, and, you know, and there's been plenty of stories, we don't want you to just go and plop, you know, 15 lilac bushes and say, hey, there we go, right next to each other and be done. But so, you know, that kind of, you know, diverse plan for the property to help everything flourish there.
You're trying to have these rules have a little bit of integrity, that you put something back similar to what was taken away.
Yes.
And protect what's there if you can, right? We don't want you to just say, oh, great, I'll go cut everything down, I'll pay into the tree bank, and we'll make it a day. No, we absolutely don't want that, so. Protecting what's there, and,
Yeah, so the tree bank is a fund,
Yes.
and, okay.
And, that was another question that we would have about, you know, what should we value a tree into that fund? Like, what's gonna be our cost? And we had, John gave,
$12.50, I think, was the
$12.50.
amount that he suggested.
that's for the tree and for planting, yeah.
Tree and planting and maintenance going.
I mean, it's not far off, and, you know, I mean, you could pick a round number and call it $1,000, honestly, if you just wanted to keep the math super simple. You know, honestly, we charge about $900 to $950 for a ball and burlap hardwood tree installed, mulched, looking good. We leave the trees in the ground, it's ready to go. I know some people charge a little less, and I know some people charge a little more.
So
but
1250 is fine.
yeah, you could leave it, I mean, whatever you want, it's up to you guys, but if it's in your best interest to have it be worth a little less, and I don't know if that would mean you'd have more
Right.
available or less available, I can't figure that out yet. But like the tree bank, I thought you meant an actual mitigation bank, like that
Oh, no.
would actually be going in somewhere else.
You know,
Well,
it's an opportunity,
yeah.
so, right,
if you, Northeast Pediatrics came in, and they wanted to make a change, it triggered the tree law. There was just no way that would be feasible for them to put the number of trees in on their property that are required by this revision of the tree law that's currently law. So, and it's the first time that that's happened. It's only been triggered twice. So in this case, we had them paying the tree bank a little bit, but we also, as a board, have, the ability to take other things into consideration. So, part of it is, protecting natural resources. Well, they also happen to have a ton of solar panels on top of their roof. So, okay, we can take that into consideration. They, maybe there's places that have some sort of steep slope. We could take that into consideration, out on Black Channel, well, there's bedrock. So here's a section of the property that you can't plant these trees on that would count. So things like that. So we have the ability to take other factors into consideration to.
Maybe at the property owner's request or something.
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah.
They come
Otherwise,
here.
they're case by case. And
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, what we don't want is somebody buying a piece of property, cutting everything down and saying, here's $25,000, it's cheaper for me to do that than worry about everything else.
It'll
So-
happen, but.
And one of the things that we've, unfortunately learned is that we have to write some of our laws for the person who's going to want to take the most advantage of it,
yeah, I think that's,
which is
So
a
it's
tough
a
place
fact
to
of
be.
life, just.
yeah, that is how
Yeah.
that goes, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think as far as the understory, overstory thing, if you had an overstory and an understory tree list, you could do something where it said like,
Pick 3.
yeah, once you get above X number of trees required for planting, now you're required to pick a minimum of 3 from this group and something like, I mean, those are sort of standard, like on jobs that aren't fully, like plant lists aren't fully specified, sometimes we'll get lists where it'll say, here's 10 species that can be used, you need to use, usually the language will be like, you need to use a minimum of 7 species out of this 10, no fewer than 15% of any one species, and no more than 50% of another. So like, there's all kinds of metrics you can make
Yeah.
up that would be pretty turnkey if you looked at it a little bit.
And that's what we're kind of looking to set up here.
I
is
mean,
something that-
I guess the question would be if it's worth breaking it into understory and overstory,
Yeah.
because there aren't that many understory trees, and what happens is.
Deer, love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, my God.
So that's why
Understory.
people plant trees, I think, a lot of the time, is because you put a tree cage around it or a trunk guard on it, and it
You've got a
outputs the deer
chance.
pressure. And the shrubs and the small trees are kind of forever living in that zone, and everybody will tell you how great serviceberry is, but every serviceberry gets eaten.
It does.
So there's a plant that's kind of now hard to work with, and so that list is short to begin with, and it just gets shorter. So that's where the trees are useful. And then the smaller stuff, which I know you may not even get into, like perennials and grasses, but if you got into those, it gives you another equivalent group that you could work with. It gives you really nice quick erosion control value in those situations. And it's a much larger pool of plants, so you have a greater chance of working with deer-proof plants when you're working with grasses and perennials. And they are a realistic component of any natural community, so it doesn't show up as much maybe in the landscape, but it does work.
And that, I think that is, I know erosion control is one of the things that we do mention in there.
That's a
But
biggie.
we don't, currently really have, right, everything that, right, when people see this law, they're worried about, okay, I can't clear cut,
here's how many, trees I have to.
put in, or shrubs put in to, meet the minimum. So yeah, maybe if there's another category of
Things that help meet that.
erosion statement in there and help the, help the property owner.
Yeah, I mean, you could jack that equivalency up on those, and you should, and, whether that's based on price, I don't know how you really do the equivalencies, but.
I think, well, here's the thing, for the only time that money comes into play is if someone's trying to purchase a tree point credit.
Yeah.
In every other thing that we've done in terms of quantifying a tree, a shrub, or whatever, it's usually, well, I mean, I think our guidance is, it's how much impact will this have on the landscape, right? So if it's something that's gonna be smaller, then it gets fewer points, if something's gonna be larger, it's gonna get more points.
Yeah.
You know, but like, you know, I'm looking at this list, we have, you know, a 2 caliper tree is 1 point. An existing tree with less than a 2-inch caliper is 0 points. You know, but you could have a tree who's been there for a few years and is only like 3 or 4 inch caliper.
Yeah.
And I can't, I'm not quite sure why we've only given that 0 points,
I don't
when a
either.
brand new one is 1, because then you could clear cut a whole area and plant half the number of trees and be fine.
A lot of the tree laws that I've seen, like around the Adirondack, APA, clearing, tree clearing regulations around the lakes, they often just exempt stuff under 4 inches because they think of it as like annoying saplings.
Right.
When in reality, you know,
And then with-
those are often, like, so that's a good example. If we're looking at
A densely wooded
1,000
area.
ash saplings, that most of which may die, I'm not sure I
Yeah.
value those as much, but if we're on someone's property and there's a 5-foot oak sapling, we definitely would leave that, and someone just got a new tree they didn't even know they had, you know?
Right.
So I don't know how much detail you want to get into on this end of that, but
Well, we need to have something.
tricky.
Well, but I think a lot of this too is, first of all, if we're a little, as a board, you know, more educated, I think a lot of this is just when people come and we say we need, it's educating to make people aware, because I don't think a lot of people even think about this stuff, and then it's sort of at the last minute,
Yeah.
and my experience has been that if we talk to people up front before they get everything planned,
Yeah,
and then it's no more expensive often to do it right as to not.
yeah,
And so if we can help them with some of this, so that they do meet with success too, because I surely planted, God knows how many things when I first moved here. Fortune, that eaten up by deer, but whatever, you know, and, you know, you just at some point just learn to what, you just, but it takes a while, and you have to have an interest.
So I guess,
yeah, they don't, usually the people that you're dealing with probably don't care that much. I mean, I shouldn't generalize, but I would imagine if it gets to the point that you have to legislate it, then they really probably don't care that much. You're
Well,
trying to
I-
make them comply with something.
yeah, I think what happens is what we see, when we see folks, it's usually because they're looking at a building,
Yeah.
a commercial space, a development of some sort, a house, and that's where most of their attention is on the actual built piece.
Yeah.
And then the landscape around it tends to be a secondary thought.
Yeah,
And so if we didn't have something in place, then you'd see, I mean, you do see in some
Already.
places around here, you know, like when the shopping center at the end over there got put in that has Aldi's and Planet Fitness and Joann's, there was nothing saying what you needed to do for trees, so there were no trees.
Yep.
And we want to make sure that there's something in the books so that something like that doesn't happen again.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess the other question I would have for you is, I know that you're trying to avoid specifying too much, but, I mean, and maybe it's in here, but native trees versus non-native trees.
Right,
At
yeah.
this stage especially, I mean, you know, people could argue with that all they want, but, you know, and again, it's someone in their front yard landscape, I'm not gonna argue with a client if they tell us they want, you know, a tree that's not native. But over the course of a lifetime of working, we wanna make sure that most of the time, that's what's happening. And maybe, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but if you don't specify native versus non-native somewhere or somehow, then I guess at least you can specify invasive species that aren't allowed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the next best thing, I
It's sort of
guess.
a negative reprint.
Right.
Yeah, one or the other.
We do have, just above this appendix, there's some language that says that we would not approve anything that would be invasive, or on the invasive plant list somewhere in there.
And we do have a tree planting allowance for our residents, and I don't know whether we stipulate that they must, when we, you know,
The one where you can get reimbursed for.
when you can be reimbursed.
There's a list of
of approved.
trees you
There
have to
are,
pick
all right,
from.
so
one
we
of them.
already have some of this.
I'm sure that hasn't been reviewed since.
I was gonna
don't-
say,
It doesn't, get- I used it years ago, I don't know if anyone's used it since.
Okay.
We'd have to ask Jody.
But that would
There you
be.
go.
we
Never
should-
heard of that. I've never heard of anyone telling
One
us
person did it last year.
that they were gonna come to get
I'm about
reimbursed.
ready to.
Yeah, so we have a bank here, it's built into the budget that,
And there's certain things, it's gotta be a
tree from this approved list, it's at least kind of, I think it can't be any more than 75 feet from the center line of a village-owned road, but yeah, and you can get reimbursed for up to, it's a
think it's
certain
like
percentage or
75 or
up to
$100.
$75 or something like
Something
that,
like
so
that,
yeah. Yep, just to encourage
sorry.
people to,
just to encourage people to, plant some trees and
Yeah.
for a little financial relief, because, trees can get
Time for
expensive.
Hill.
Okay, so let's get one thing at least. Maybe a little more
You wanna
settled.
pin something down?
I do, I really like to pin something down. So we have on
Which one are we on?
we're on 3G and H.
Me too.
So on the third page there.
Okay.
We have at least 25% of new trees shall be understory trees with less than 40-foot mature height, 25% overstory. And then in H, it says at least 25% evergreen and at least 25% deciduous. So I would love to nail down some numbers of how we want to give guidance to shade trees, ornamental trees, evergreen trees, native trees in this, so that we can at least get that little piece maybe sorted today.
The other thing is, if you're gonna mention evergreen, most people are gonna go towards spruces because they're considered deer-proof. And most people are gonna plant Norways.
Yes, they are.
And so, because they're most adaptable, least likely to die, fastest growing. So, you've got, it's interesting how, like, just the use of the word evergreen is basically a code word for saying we're gonna encourage people to plant Norway spruces, which may be at odds with a goal that you have to try to get people to plant other types of trees, I don't know. So, those are all things that should be poured over just a little bit. The other part on their I, where it talks about trees shall be ecologically compatible with the site where possible. You don't have anywhere else that you qualify what that means, right?
Right.
So I don't know
Kinda
if it's
doesn't
worth
mean
saying that if you don't want to qualify it, unless
Compatible.
you want to link it to soils, I don't know. I think it gets complicated, but it's really more a question of if, I think that's really on, the scenario that you're describing there, is that really like a homeowner comes here and says they want to clear up a plot of land, and you're gonna tell them, well, there's certain rules about tree planting, and I'm not sure, like, what's a scenario where they would be advocating for trees that aren't ecologically compatible, and you would,
Good thought, question.
Yeah,
you
I
would
mean-
argue that?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, if you're hiring a professional, the professional's going to give you good advice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they should.
Yeah,
I mean, when I hear ecologically compatible, I think about like mostly trees that don't grow well in clay. That's
Yeah.
what I think about, or wet, like really wet lawns and properties that we see all the time that are saturated. So I don't know if there's another way that you can, like,
Maybe it just.
I think we
I
strike
just
that.
get rid of it.
I think we
See,
should
that's
strike
what
that.
We need a fresh look at.
or you might want to say something about, like, if you go in this direction, you could consider saying something like, something about approval, that somehow, at some point in the future, I could see where you get to the point where, just like somebody's decisions about how they handle the staircase is approved or
Right.
certified, or someone stamps it. I mean, you could have a very simple process if you had a nice framework for tree planting in here. You could have a process where someone says, here are the trees I'm gonna plant, and you guys just all say, yep, they meet our requirements, and it's a good.
which we do, I mean, they.
Is that pretty much it?
They
Yeah.
they have
Have to give us a
to.
planting plan,
Yeah, they
Yeah,
have to
okay, I
do the
saw
plan.
that,
A
yeah.
landscape plan. yeah.
landscape planting.
So everybody, like, what are cases where someone doesn't have to do that in here, like?
Minor subdivision.
A resident.
A resident.
Of a residential building permit doesn't have to have one.
yeah, this specific, the
This is-
planting piece of the law only really gets triggered if you need a special permit.
Yes.
That's where,
And
There's
that-
another piece of the law that talks about removal of trees from your property that is just universal in the village. Doesn't matter if you're residential, commercial, building a new building, you can't just walk out of your, well,
According to,
you can't walk out of your house one day and say,
I'm just gonna cut everything down.
Yeah, I saw that in there.
That's a violation of the
Okay.
law. So that-
And does that trigger a special permit at that point?
No,
No, that triggers a fine.
That's a different pathway, yeah.
Yeah.
And the special permit is triggered when?
Oh, gosh, there's a bunch
Various
of.
applications, so it
Yeah.
might be a home occupation. We've also talked about not requiring it when there won't be a change to the footprint of the property, if it's an internal use change.
But there's a range of things.
Yeah.
yeah, there's a range of things that trigger special permit.
Development or clearing driven.
Yeah, basically, if you're going to significantly change the footprint of the built part of your property, you've probably triggered a special permit. And there's a few other things that also trigger that don't have to do with the change of your footprint.
Home occupation, someone wants to now do business out of their home, nothing changed, but they need to have, so that's what actually, if something sort of along those lines happen, and this person comes and we say, oh, triggers the tree law, you're gonna have to start planting trees, and nothing had changed in their life except that they wanted to do business out of their home.
Right, so I think we're leaning towards making it so that basically if you change basically the impervious area of your property, because you've built a building, you've put in a pool,
Or parking, something like that.
more parking, like that would trigger that.
And those
I-
are scale, I mean, if someone just
Yeah.
extends a driveway to add a parking spot, obviously you're not, I would imagine you're not like hawking over that, or is that
We're
part of
gonna
it?
give a lot more discretion, I think, to the board than we currently have.
Yeah.
We didn't have a waiver, we didn't have the ability to waive some of this in this current law.
Okay.
Which is problematic, because as you've been pointing out, every situation, honestly, is kind of
Yeah, I
different.
think Black Chin's a great example.
Yeah,
Great plan, you can't do it.
yeah.
Just can't. Or you can, but everything's gonna die.
I don't know if it was a great plan, though, to me.
Could have been a great plan.
No, I mean, it was fine, it was just, I don't mean it was a great plan, it's just like, I'm always skeptical that a plan that's that comprehensive or has that much scope, it's never gonna, even 80% of it is never gonna be actionable. So, there's at least gonna be, I'll say, 25% of any of those big plans like that aren't practical for some reason, and that's kind of what happened there. But there's lots of those things that just get repeated over and over and over again. But, it kind of does go back to, if I think it's ambitious for anyone and for you guys to try to come up with a really good, high-quality tree planting protocol that is somehow like specific enough that it really works for here, and general enough that you don't feel like you've become a tree advisory council as a group.
Right.
But
Yes, that is the issue we're finding.
that's tricky. I mean, and honestly, I mean, that problem exists all throughout, like every single instance of someone choosing what to plant somewhere is contentious. It always is contentious,
Yeah.
whether it's just between the homeowner and two designers giving them different opinions, or a contractor and a planning board, or a landscaper and a designer. I mean, there's always contentious things, and it really does come down to, like, is it opinion or is it act? And if it's opinion, it's pretty hard to write this stuff up based on opinion.
Yeah, no, you can't.
But people will argue over opinion. But if there's a way to get it so that we can sort of stop just before it becomes subjective,
Right.
that would be kind of fun, and
Yeah.
it should work. I mean, I think that could work, but.
And what the idea is, if it's a good enough net that it catches 70% of the things
That
that
would
come
be
through,
good.
that's great. And then we use our discretion for the other 30%. That would be a fantastic way to structure this.
And right now, you don't have you have a specific list of trees that you don't want people planting.
I think it's the county list, isn't it? I don't know whether we do.
Yeah,
I mean,
we refer-
We haven't visited this stuff, and so.
You have an invasive species type list of.
Yeah, we tell people to refer to the state invasive, I think it's a state invasive species list.
One of the PRISM lists or something. But you don't have a list currently of plants that you do want people to plant that are actually named.
Not
No, we do
as
not.
it relates to this. No.
I think your suggestion, and we will be in touch, is to have.
It'd be fun, I mean,
I think it would be great.
Yeah.
But I think to come to some people that we know are knowledgeable about this and can really give us, this is an opportunity for all of us to kind of maybe move some of this forward.
I think what you want to be careful with is, as soon as you get further and further away from Lansing, the information is just gonna not be as hands-on.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you probably could find some people in Ithaca that would give you good information, but it's just very different. If we get to
No.
put stuff in Fall Creek, I mean, it's
Whole
just
different,
like
yeah.
TV soil. You just put the shovel in and there's no rock. But up here,
Yeah, no.
forget it. So that's very different
Yeah.
conditions.
Well, just
very
even
different
as you move up the hill, if you're, the closer you get to the lakes, the worse it gets. You get up here where it's a little more level, there's actually dirt up here.
Farmland, yeah. the old
And
farm.
there's some trees that'll grow tall. I mean, it's
I'm
like-
actually shocked that the ash that I have in my front yard has gotten as big as it has with the soil that we have.
I mean, once they get going, they will fracture bedrock. The roots
Yeah.
will fracture the bedrock, but, it's really a question of, in that first year or so, are they gonna survive all?
I'm always amazed as I get off Route 13 with all the layers, and out come the birches, they're growing off the
Yeah.
side in the middle of nothing. And I'm thinking,
Yeah, so if you look at, like, this is the area you're covering, right? So basically, like, it starts to level off up here, but all of this is all sliding down to the lake.
Yeah, and
And
it's
so
all-
what you're planting in this area,
Yeah.
it's much more challenging. You've got to plant smaller trees so that they have a chance to fracture. If a big tree, you just can't
But
even
the
get them in
dirt
there.
just keeps
But over
pushing
here, we have a lot more opportunity to dig deeper.
However, what you also, when you put it this way, as soon as you get up here where it flattens out is where it just sits wet all the time. Like, that's where, you can see the trees at the end of Warren Road, just at the intersection with Route 13, there's a bunch of trees there.
Yes, and they're
Hotel.
underwater sometimes.
And that whole lot is just always underwater, and those trees are like still 11 feet tall. They've been 11 feet tall for 30 years.
That's their mature height.
Which is what I was saying, like, this is not, we don't live in a place that's great for hitting mature height of anything.
But to your point, is so I moved here about, 29 years ago, and we went, I think we got one of those, extension service, you could go and get saplings, or seedlings, a bundle of trees, right?
Yeah.
And so I planted some eastern white pines. Well, one of them made it, and it's now in my front yard, sort of.
Yeah.
And it's about maybe 8 or 10 inches across. It's 30 years old, essentially, and it's now about 20 feet tall, maybe. But it's healthy, and it did find its way into the rocks.
Yeah, I mean, they're, they're basically binary creatures. They're either, if they're alive, then they're doing well according to them, that's it. So the problem is when we start to put parameters on it, like, if we're gonna plant a tree, we expect it to have a shape, and we expect it to make shade, and we expect it to reach a certain height. And that's where, you really don't want a list to be short. That's the thing I would worry about. You
Yeah.
want it to be as broad and generous as possible, but.
When you say about evergreens too, though, Norway spruce do survive here, is one of the problems.
Yeah, they do well,
And,
yeah.
and I mean, at some point, is a tree that's not the best one better than no tree at all?
That's a really good question.
Well, or I would say is the tree that's maybe not the best one, better than the tree that, that is, isn't gonna thrive or do well or live. I don't know if that's what you mean by none at all. Maybe that is none at all, but, yeah, I'm not a purist with any of that stuff. I mean, we have Norway spruce in the nursery right now. If I could plant all native species, I would, but between deer and soil
That's what I'm-
conditions and water, it's not, that's just not usually realistic. So I think you could that's just maybe part, maybe one of the parameters is you encourage people to have 25% native trees, or pick a number. You could make that number higher than the percentage number, you could do whatever you
Less
want.
desirable but allowed kind of thing.
Yeah, or not even mess with the native, non-native thing. I'm not trying to tell you you should do that, but,
Well, I think-
I think there's probably, I'm gonna guess there's 5 basic parameters, more or less. You've got, encouraging people to use a certain number of native trees maybe is one of them, and quantity of trees is another parameter. Size that people plant is another one. Diversity.
Diversity.
Is probably one, just
Diversity is
having a mix, and that
important.
doesn't have to mean native diversity, but just diversity.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, I mean,
maybe that's the basic.
I mean, right up at E there, it says no more than three, if more than 3 trees are required to be planted, no more than 1/3 maybe of any one genus.
If more than 3 trees now.
Last page, 3E. If more than 3 trees are required to be planted, no more than
1/3, maybe of
1/3.
any one genus.
So you're basically saying if someone has to plant 4 trees, they're gonna have at least 3 different trees, yeah. I mean, okay, now just play devil's advocate there. From a landscape design standpoint,
Yeah,
if I were held to that stricture, I'd be like, well, that's frustrating, because now we have a hodgepodge of trees, you know, and we might want to plant three red buds on a curve or something like that.
Right.
So, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but I think somehow,
could we word it
this
differently?
form, like, maybe some sort of like spreadsheet format might be an interesting way to put these things together, because some of these may be at odds, you know, one of them may be at odds with another one, and I don't know how to reconcile that yet, but somehow, I guess you could.
So, well, our goal in this one is to not have die out of a certain species, right?
That was the goal.
So, I mean, so maybe this wording
Well, it's-
doesn't achieve that goal.
It's
quite.
not die out, but also I'm gonna echo what Pat was saying about how, you know, he was visiting somewhere and it's just like a line of all the same things. Oh, sorry.
Oh, Jim. Jim was the one that
It was
doesn't like the
Jim?
lineup, yeah.
The
lineup
the
of evergreen.
soldier of all the same thing over and over again. So there's an aesthetic concern, you know, with the idea that you have some diversity, that you have some, you know, opportunity to have, you know, different kinds of things blooming at different times of year, or different, you
I think
know.
diversity is an easier pill to swallow for people reading something like this,
Yeah.
as opposed to someone saying, well, wait, you know, I happen to like a row of 20
Right.
maples up my driveway, and why is the town telling me I can't
Actually,
do
it
that?
was quite lovely.
And LA is a beautiful thing, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if there, it's complicated, because you guys, what's happening is you guys are gonna be like butting up against design ideas
Right.
as well. And
Well,
I keep thinking residential, I suppose more often these things may be coming into play.
No, I mean, if you look at our
Maybe.
village, there's way more residential properties than there are commercial properties.
Right.
And so, I mean, although residential comes forward less often than commercial, because they tend to be smaller things that don't have to see the board, but there are a lot of residential properties here.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to be able to,
well, I think we
eloquently
need
to say
to say, what do we want the diversity for? Part of it is,
Right, yeah.
why do we want that?
yeah.
And then try to, because, yeah, it is true that when you drive down a street and it's got all the same trees, it's impacts aesthetically. However, you know, when they all drop dead, then it really is another impact of
Right.
sorts, and when they are sort of spaced, but like, is 3 the right number? I mean,
I think the big picture question with this is just, do you really want, and you may want to, but do you really want to sort of regulate the aesthetic part?
I'm going to see, I've
that's
always
what you want.
felt that you cannot, you
Yeah, we
can't
don't-
regulate this, you cannot legislate
If
aesthetics.
you have a diversity requirement, then that might solve that problem.
I think-
But what if someone wants to do a nice driveway LA of one type of tree, and then do
Then
they
they-
just have to come here and ask? and you
They have
guys-
to come and ask.
There's a way for permission to be granted by the.
That,
Yeah.
or you plant a bunch of smaller things somewhere else on your property to
Yeah.
kind of offset the percentages.
Yeah.
You know, so if you do want 10 maples, and that's gonna be 25%, well, then you've gotta make sure
Yeah,
that
I
you've
see,
got
yeah.
a bunch of other things somewhere else.
Right, so that's what I was sort of alluding to, like, okay, so you have this, that's one goal, and then you have to just maybe check your numbers and say, well, what is that really gonna translate to? If someone wants to
Yeah.
plant 20 maples, and these percentages dictate that that represents X% of the total,
Right.
does that mean that this person's gonna have to plant 90 trees?
Yeah,
Yeah, and again, it's to reach the minimum tree density, which is, when this law is triggered, there's nothing stopping me from going home right now and lining my entire driveway with pine trees.
True.
that's absolutely true.
That has nothing to do with this law at all. I could go do it today. I could come get all the Norway spruces you have, and,
I think,
That's important to know.
But yeah.
These regulations are to hit your minimum. And once you've hit your minimum, then you are free to do whatever you want on your.
And they
property.
also, like, wouldn't apply to someone just taking on a design project.
Yeah,
Well, I
you could
think
go
that-
plant 20 maples right now for funsies.
Yeah, the other important thing is, I think, really, commercial is where we really want to be sure we've got our stuff covered, because when developers come, they don't want to do anything to
Yeah.
speak of, and we've gotten caught in the past without any leverage. And so, that's my personal thing I'm saying.
What happens in that case?
We try, and, oh, it's too expensive, it's all going to go down, and depending on what the makeup of our board is,
Yeah,
strong. So I think for my thought is for a vision for the village to have more beautification when developers come.
Yeah.
We just want some leverage to say, well, this is, this up front, just plan for it.
and they're planting, and the developer has a planting plan, and that planting plan is
Going to adhere
presumably
to,
done. So I think a planting plan on a commercial scale,
Yeah.
it's very fair and maybe even wise for you guys to, at that point, that should be,
A professional.
yeah, you want that to be
Yeah.
certified by someone, if it's for a commercial development project, for sure.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I guess, is your opportunity to address in that case.
but I think that is a whole different thing and that's one of the reasons we got a tree law, because we're looking at some developments
So I'll share.
coming along.
I'll share this too, so this is it doesn't have invasive species on it, but this is the Village of Lansing tree planting program, so there are species you should plant. Here are some other varieties which thrive well. Norway spruce is on here, by the way.
Is it Norway? Well,
Sorry,
you know
I'll
what?
zoom in to make it a little bit.
The
It's also behind you, too.
Oh, yeah, it is behind you, so that's easier too, yeah. But yeah, so,
Some of those probably wouldn't.
I don't think I've ever seen
Honey
this list.
What?
I've never seen this list before, so.
It's oddball.
it's on the tree planting application for reimbursement form. So the first page is like, here's, the cost of the tree and stuff like that, yeah.
What's a hedge maple?
That's a good question.
And why is calorie pear on there?
And Katsura tree, like, mostly dies.
Yeah, see, I think we need to revise this.
We absolutely.
Green ash is on there.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, see,
Does it have a date?
Doug fir, that's an old plant.
that's an old list, I mean,
I was gonna say, no, this
is
needs
the one
total,
interesting,
I
yeah.
guarantee you, anything we have
Yeah, I don't know.
Nice to.
hasn't been looked at in
in
years.
years,
Kentucky coffee tree is.
those are great.
Turkish hazelnut just sounds like coffee, which.
Hey, what
I want some coffee, I guess.
Oh, I love.
Does sound tasty.
I know it does.
It's an
A
odd,
lot of these actually sound.
odd tree choice, though, the Turkish.
They're wonderful, yeah.
Tree.
I want to see more for
Calorie
oaks
pear,
everywhere,
is
that's
that-
for sure.
Is calorie pear, what are the ones?
Calorie pear are invasive.
Is that like
Yeah.
the ones we got here on
Those are
the street?
those are the street trees here.
Scotch pine and Doug fir and Austrian pine, I mean, my God,
Austrian
those are
pine we
like,
wouldn't have.
that's like a 1960s plant list right there. I hate
Well,
to.
that's about,
Not everybody look at me, I didn't come up with it.
$75.
maybe it's
even up the
well, this
price.
is retro, why don't we bring it back?
Because I was going to use the Scots pine as an example earlier of like a design that we were asked to plant at the Montessori school, I think, years ago. And then like the one tree they wanted to plant was Scotch pine, like,
They must have had it.
Hi.
They were looking for
Christmas tree or something.
reimbursement.
Yeah, they won by $75.
Yeah.
but I mean, it's a tree that was popular a long time ago, and it started to succumb to disease everywhere, so everyone's afraid to use it. You can't find that tree in the trade really anymore, because growers don't want to grow it, because it dies. So the fact that it's still on a list is just an indication that that list probably came from
Well, it
someone
hasn't been,
textbook.
this stuff hasn't been looked at in years.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable. A lot of tree commission lists around the country probably look just like that still.
Yeah, I'm sure that's,
They haven't really been
they're
tweaked
in
in a
place,
while.
everything's we're finding.
But I think that, the moral of the story is, this has come up in multiple topics, what should we
Plant where, whether it's a developer working on a piece of property, whether it's this tree law, there's the reimbursement thing, so I think, the
goal really is for us to have some appendix somewhere, not tied to the tree law, but referenced by the tree law, referenced as we work with developers, well, what should I plant? What do you guys like or don't like? I'm a developer from out of state, we just bought them all, and now what works well here?
we don't know that. They can hire somebody, but,
Yeah.
In the village,
theoretically, if we,
right, we ask folks,
who are used to planting here in the village, what's best, they're gonna know a lot better than,
You know, some engineer from some company, even if that engineer is local here, you know, what works well in the village.
Well,
So,
and a lot of our bigger developers are from away.
Yeah,
And they're even like you say, if they're from Rochester or Syracuse, it's just a whole different.
it's different.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I see
And
a lot
it's
of
a
times with the
aesthetic, too.
design team that's brought in on those
That's
projects.
right, and they
from
don't know.
Boston,
I
and they don't
mean,
know.
the one over here at McGuire, they wanted, what's this, hemlocks. We said,
Oh,
well,
right,
that'll
yeah,
get,
I
they're
can't
just
do
gonna
that.
all get, that'll get it. Well,
I mean,
but anyway,
well, I will say that if you, I mean, it's almost like a de facto, your de facto list would be if you even didn't ask me or David and just wandered our nurseries. Basically, we're gonna have the things that work, because we are asleep at the wheel if we have plants in the nursery that don't work here. And David's good about that, and we try to be good about that, and honestly, I don't really know off the top of my head who else I really consider
no, I think
viable that way, but.
we have somewhere, I know I have somewhere, and I know Jody has it. David came to a planning board or the trustees 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and did a presentation, and this maybe even was from that.
Yeah, it looks like it. It looks like what David was planning 30 years ago. He would probably make the same joke.
No, right, but I think that's where some of this came from.
It could be, yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, I know, I believe it.
Which was great at the time,
Yeah,
but
absolutely, yeah.
it needs to be looked at every couple
Yeah,
of years.
absolutely, that's all it is.
Yeah.
And if you just, you know, made it a habit or part of the regulations.
About
that
every couple of years.
Five-year
we have
review.
this documented somewhere, but
Yeah.
everything else references, it's a lot less
Like when we get
Daunting to
lost.
be like, I gotta go and update the tree line, I gotta go update this form, and I gotta be like,
And
let's
where
just
is
go
it?
review this one pager on the website.
Right.
still looks good, yeah.
Yeah, updating the law is a lot of work to update, but
Yeah.
an appendix is easy.
Yeah, and just, you know, and that list has, I'm gonna just say it's got, you know, 25 species on it or so, and that's a lot of choices. I mean, usually
Should
you
find a
don't
way
want people to have, that's a lot, that's too many choices. If we give a client 25 choices, we'll never hear from them again. But, you know, we try to break it down, say like, you know, these are the 4 or 5 trees that we think will do well on your property, and anyone who doesn't care that much will find a list even shorter than that to be
More than
plenty,
adequate,
plenty, yeah. And it should be trees that they can find locally. That's the key.
Yeah.
Well, that's really
That's really
good.
the point, making it easy for them.
Yeah.
And that all should be self-referential, because if you're buying trees locally, you should be buying people that have trees that work locally.
And that was one of the goals here, is let's
Yeah.
figure out how to make this as easy for people to comply, because
Yeah.
the easier it is for them to comply, the more likely they are to comply, the more we will achieve the village goals of making sure that there's, you know, more density of plantings and better diversity and so on and so forth.
Make it work.
Well, and just as, you know, to be as environmentally friendly as possible, I know that, you know, it doesn't make a huge impact, but I'd rather you get something from here and not buy something from California and have to, you know, pay to have it shipped all the way here.
Yeah, I mean,
That's wasteful.
The warranty, they can drive right over.
That's true.
I mean, anything that we plant, we generally warranty, but, you know, more and more I tell people, like, well, we don't warranty against this, and this.
Well, you can't.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's where, you know, you mentioned earlier maintenance, or in the tree cost concept, that might include maintenance. I don't think you want to get into specifying too much about maintenance, other than,
They have to water it, somebody's got to water
yeah,
it.
do you have a survival requirement, or like, people plant these and just let them?
Not for
about
this,
it would be
for
too
certain things where we require things to, yeah, certain things where we require things to be buffered, it is a continual buffer, so if something dies, you do, but that's not a
We want it-
residential,
It has to be
yeah,
usually a
replaced.
residential thing, yeah.
I think the cost alone for most people is enough of an incentive for them to keep it alive.
In a
But we
residential setting.
do talk about,
About watering down here, though, too, they tell people if you're gonna plant it yourself, how to water it on the
Well,
form, so
you
there you
know,
go, see?
yeah, well, you do have, that's really important initially, especially.
I mean, you could put something in there about, you know, a very simple thing about like the advantage to, if you're not gonna be able to water it, we encourage fall planting, just because it
Oh.
minimizes watering needs.
This is another question that I would like for you to answer, which is not necessary, well, I mean, there is a little bit in here. We talked about having timing for planting.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And so I would like to hear from the horse's mouth, when is it appropriate time to plant trees, and when is it a not appropriate time to plant trees, so that we can give guidance to the people who've come in to ask.
We usually tell people the best time to plant trees is when you're ready. like, that their site's ready, they have a hose hooked up, then that's really, I mean, if you can dig a hole, whether that's between, April or March and December, and if you're prepared to water a tree, then it's pretty much any time then is fine. But if you can't water, we encourage people to plant in the fall, because those trees pretty much are not gonna have any drought stress for the first 6 or 8 months.
And, okay, so, because we had a situation where someone was required to put in trees, and they said, can we put that off till the spring? And it was late October, maybe, that came up, and I thought to myself, you could plant until like December 15th.
Oh, we plant,
Easily.
I mean,
Easily.
we
And-
definitely plant through there, yeah.
And they were very.
I love planting that time of year.
Yeah, they were very
It's just messy.
strident about, oh, no, it's too late for us to get something in the ground.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfect. You want those trees to get snowed on, but, they're just getting watered. But in the spring, I think it's a bigger risk to do spring plantings, because most people don't realize how to either adequately water a tree, or they just don't have the setup to water trees. And so it really makes a huge difference. When we see trees suffer, it's almost always that spring planting, beautiful wet soil, beautiful cool temps, rain's falling, and then like 3 days later, it shifts over to a 3-week drought. No rain for 3 weeks.
We're famous.
And-
Water table drops, and no one's paying attention to the trees.
Yeah.
And those trees are going through stress in their first month. And it's just like a baby. I mean, they don't have a tolerance at that point. They don't have roots growing yet. So that's a much greater risk for us, is those spring plantings that turn dry. Summer, I think, is all about if it's wet.
Right.
No problem with summer plantings. If we're having a rainy summer, it's a great time to plant stuff. Soils are wet. We're getting rain, it's humid, it's great. But it's that spring window that I think is the most dangerous, because we often have a dry spell in our spring. And then the fall, if you have a dry spell, it's cool.
And they aren't quite as active.
They're not as active,
Well, okay,
not
and
as
then-
much stress, yeah.
And then in terms of
Stress reduction.
planting when trees are dormant, so it's mid-November, trees have dropped their leaves, you've got a couple of, probably 4 weeks before you
Yeah.
have a hard freeze.
Great time.
Okay,
They
so,
don't know what hit them.
yeah.
Just wake up in the ground before they know what happened.
No, I've always been an advocate, plant your trees like around Thanksgiving. It's a
It's a good
fantastic
time.
time to plant.
Yeah, we always tell people, the problem with fall planting is you have to wait 6 months to see
I
anything.
got my landscaping redone in the fall, and I was really bummed.
Yeah, it's a long time.
But aren't you glad you did?
Yes, well,
See?
it has to grow
Yeah.
now, but,
Oh, this is this last fall?
yeah.
Oh, so you haven't seen it yet?
So that's actually really important for us to
Another
know, is
parameter
that,
to
a
work.
parameter that up until, say, like, basically mid-December.
I think we already
It's a
knew
really
some
good
of
time.
this.
I think the issues are site conditions can be a mess. Contractors may have pulled off sites if, like, we'll get a November snow, and they may sort of demobilize. So, as far as like forcing someone to plant in December, I don't know. But I certainly wouldn't have legislation that says you can't plant after November 15th or anything like that. I'd say go as late,
Oh, no.
late as you can go. Late as, until the
Besides,
ground's
they're
frozen.
getting
I mean,
later and
Until the
later.
ground's frozen.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
you
like this,
know,
I mean, I was gonna say this December,
it's been moving, everything has been shifting.
Yeah.
So that it's
Could
a
have planted
longer
every
fall.
month this
Yeah.
winter.
Yeah,
That's
there was
right.
like 2 weeks where it was too cold.
And they'll be fine. I mean, and so that dormant period is great. The thing about planting during dormant period is the plants really have very little stress. It's all about stress reduction with planting trees and really planting anything. But the small stuff, when they're disturbed, their roots start growing immediately, like day 1, day 2.
Big tree.
Shrubs, you put them in, they might take a few days to start growing, but when you get those ball and burlap trees, I mean, sometimes it takes 2 years for their roots to really establish. And so if they're just sitting in a little clay ball of burlap,
They're never leaving.
and you have 3 weeks of no rain and nobody's watering, all they have is what's in that little burlap sack, and that's when trees die. I would guess 95% of tree plantings that fail, it's that first early period and they don't get water. That's just what kills them, And then the other part would be if they sit in horrendously wet clay soils and they don't like that. That's
Yeah.
the other thing that kills them, but that's about it. That and deer, those are the 3 things that kill trees. We expect them to live. I mean, I expect 100% survival on stuff that we do.
Okay.
That's reality.
I do want to be cognizant of time, it's 8:30, we have a couple other things to go over. That was outstanding, thank you so
We
much,
want you to,
that was great.
we're gonna be in touch.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you gave us so many ideas and people
Now,
to reach out to for
we're gonna
things, I
have to
mean.
track you
It's
down
not
for
a
a list.
quick, I don't think it's a quick solution.
No, it is
But,
not.
you know,
But
you
we're
could
gonna have
get
a
a
thoughtful
solution
one.
if you want, and I'd be happy to help. And if, I guess, would someone summarize some specific things as it relates to this? How do you want, I mean, I'll help however you want, but I'm not sure I want to take on, like, writing this
Oh, no,
from scratch, but.
We
But-
need you to get a list. I think that's great.
I think the one easy suggestion that I think everyone's in favor of is, yeah, reaching out to a couple local folks and just maybe building, right, we can work on the code in tandem while we generate a list of, hey, here's what folks say, you know, is appropriate for the area and would grow well, and.
Favorite list of
Yeah.
trees and
Yeah,
shrubs.
honestly, I think, okay, I would be in favor of getting together a list of, 20, so people feel like they have lots of choices.
Yeah.
20 trees that will become established large shade trees. People are gonna also wanna have like ornamental trees of some
Yep,
sort.
exactly.
So a secondary list that has some ornamental trees.
Which you could
Those
just
would be
call
like crab
smaller.
apples and stuff.
We could call them
You, like,
smaller
if you want to
trees.
lump a whole other category in, you could have
Yeah.
like big trees and small trees. I
Yeah,
mean, you
so-
could come up with better words, but
Right,
instead of calling them understory or instead
Yeah.
of saying
I think
ornamental.
big is
Right.
works for me.
so, I mean, shade trees versus smaller trees, or, I don't know.
I mean, those are established terms, shade
Yeah.
trees and ornamental trees are established terms, but for some people, they may just think of them as like big trees and small
Yeah,
trees.
yeah, so and let's make it as simple language as possible, so large trees, small trees. And do we want to do anything about evergreens?
Wouldn't that be?
Are
Or
they,
do we
they
just-
come in different sizes too, after all. I mean, we do
Yeah.
have,
Wouldn't be a shade tree, but it would be a big tree.
No, they'd be
What's
a
the
big.
purpose of the evergreen reference?
Well, I think the evergreen was just to have a diversity of planting so that there's something green in all year round.
And I mean,
But also like
yeah.
habitat, places for birds to nest and that kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
We need a place for our fauna to be as well.
So I think that's a separate parameter.
how often do people come up and just say,
I just want something that the deer won't eat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so, I mean, it's enough.
Okay,
that
so,
would be buckthorn.
okay, so large deciduous, small deciduous, a list of evergreen
Evergreen,
species.
So when you say small deciduous, is that your ornamentals are in there, or do you want to have flowering, or what do you
No, I would
consider?
just-
I'm interested to know what ornamentals are. Are those flowering ones, or holly, or what are ornamentals?
Well, I want to, I mean, I could talk about this longer than tonight, but, so I don't want to stretch you guys out too much, but maybe those are the types of questions that would be good to put into a document.
Okay.
Not just,
Okay.
like, that's a good question, and, we don't have to answer it right here, but.
Yeah.
But as many of those questions, because maybe we'll find that we can kind of consolidate, and then you end up with a easier list for people to digest, and.
Buckets for you to pick from as you're
Yeah.
doing whatever it is, whether you're
But I'm
building a
just
new
wondering
house,
where
or
some
this
of
law has
these,
been
like,
triggered, or
I
whatever.
always had a dog, but I want a dog.
Yeah.
Where does that fit? And I don't know where that would go.
Small,
Yeah.
Small.
Yeah,
unless you want to specify small and ornamental, or, I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know, we don't want to find sort.
no, so I think for deciduous, we could do large and small, and then we could do large shrub, small shrub. I don't know, do we even want small?
For shrub, we always do small, medium, and large on the shrubs.
Okay.
Like, that's how I tell clients how to look at shrubs, is, spirea,
Oh, when you're-
pine bark,
Yeah, because I mean,
double file.
we do count shrub, like 4 shrubs equals 1
I was
tree.
gonna say,
Oh, no.
we went through this with the shrub units, and it was a
I
weird
was
thing.
slap happy
We
by
had-
the end
we
of it.
tried-
One large equals
We had
one.
to change it because the decimals were not, I said, I'm not understanding how this adds up to, and we finally we changed it, didn't we?
If you have decimals.
Yeah, no, it was just
You
crazy.
know what, we could also make it so that our smallest number is 1.
I was thinking about that earlier.
So like a small shrub is
change the
1,
numbering.
a small shrub, a medium shrub is 2, a large shrub is 3, and
Then
then,
also saying
Tree is
something like,
4.
oh, but by the way, you can't go and just plant 30 shrubs to get
Right.
up there, so, a map, so,
yeah.
But-
So, yes,
Okay, so shrubs, you usually say, but I think one of the things that would be helpful is that some of this should be not just for us to understand, but for when we send them off to somebody to say, I want this. There's
I think
small, medium, and large.
Well,
Yeah, I think that's.
I mean, I think like hearing David's comment about what he said, David told him, like, I've never seen a 6-foot lilac in a 2-gallon pot. If you're sending them to the right places, I mean, you know, David's correct about that. You can get a 6-foot tree in a 2-gallon pot, but it's not really what is meant for a 2-gallon pot. And that was what David was
It shouldn't have
saying.
been left in there.
But I think that, you know, any nursery around here should understand the difference between a small and a large tree. If they don't, then
A
you should
nursery
send them
will,
to
but
those
maybe
nurseries.
home.
But what we want to make sure is that homeowners understand it, because
Yes.
ultimately, it's the homeowner.
I think it would, that'd be part of the list, though. Big
Yeah.
trees,
Yeah, big
these trees, small
Yeah.
trees, these trees, and so
Small,
then you
medium,
have to
and large
understand,
shrubs.
they just
Yeah.
have to know the rules, right?
Exactly.
Small, medium, and large
Yeah, we can make
shrubs.
it look nice and understandable, there you go.
Yeah,
And that's it, it's not an infinite number of categories, you know?
Right,
no,
Maybe
Okay.
big trees, deciduous and evergreen, small trees, deciduous and evergreen, shrubs, small, medium, and large,
Done.
that's
and
it.
then, and then we're good.
And then if
we
you wanted to
discuss
get into
them.
like perennials and grasses, I mean, I know that might seem like too much detail, but it is a real component of landscapes, and it does help.
I also
Whether
think
we
it's-
include that in the tree law or not, though, that might be information we provide on there for people who, again, I don't care, I don't need to do anything at my house right now, I'm interested in planting some, you know, grasses, I can at least go to the list and see it, independent of any part of the law or anything.
It's a good resource for our
It's a
community.
resource, and that's my point. If we're gonna go through the effort of doing it for the tree law, let's just do it.
Right, yeah, no, that's a great idea, and then, I mean, if we wanted to have something like that in the tree law where we say, you know, in
For
cases.
erosion control and
For
stuff.
erosion control or for shallow soils.
Consider-
You can consider X number of square feet of perennial planting to be X number of points.
And you get into lakes, lake shore, I don't know how much of that, yeah, you do.
We don't
But
really have
you know,
much.
too much, that's good, you don't want to deal with that. Because it's
I mean,
all
we do,
rock.
but not-
But I don't want to keep you guys, I know you have other stuff.
Well, we don't want to keep you,
But,
but thank you so
No, this-
much.
this is actually-
It's been great.
Sure, yeah,
Yeah.
and it would be fun if we can,
Yeah.
I don't know, figure
Yeah.
it out, that'd be interesting, so.
Yes.
You almost made it, you were so close, so close.
Well, I appreciate it, and.
Thank you again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is an update on the solar law, which I have, so things took me a lot longer in the Florida trip, which I was not looking forward to going to anyway, for the record. But I had a couple emails back and forth with Carolyn, she wanted to make sure I was still working on it, so I did finally get that, an update to her. I don't know why it's not letting me,
So are
not gonna let me
you going
get
to
the
send that
Gmail
to
again.
us, or?
Yeah, so I wanted to give her a chance just to look over it to make sure I didn't misinterpret
Yeah.
anything, but I did go
Okay.
back and rewatch that's what took the longest, was going back and rewatching the meeting, just to make sure that I didn't miss stuff. I want to bring up the email that I sent, but pretty much what it involved was removing some definitions that weren't needed, it was in the draft before, so if, we didn't need it, sure. But keeping one of the two farm ones and incorporating some of the language from the other ones together. Updating the square footage to something larger.
Right.
But then also putting a requirement in tier 2 for anything that was over, I think, 500, we said in the meeting.
Right.
That, hey, now there's this section about visibility and screening and things like that. Keeping some of the changes that we had discussed. There was a discussion about ownership changes, there was
Oh,
discussion
yeah.
about why is this language here, and I
I
think.
feel pretty strongly
It was,
about
so
that.
I kept that in there and noted it, just because that's kind of what, our legal counsel recommended.
That's
And that
right.
it wasn't really that burdensome, it's a very similar
it's not
process to
Right.
what we do with plats and things like that, but providing when we do the thing, hey, here's what it should say, sign, stamp, done, drop it off, there you go, yeah. Keeping the full decommissioning plans, but
Yes.
changing them a little bit for, so like under tier 1, the decommissioning plan is really meant for ground-mounted solar.
Yeah.
In tier 1. For tier 2 and tier 3, different things, but so, those were the high points. Once I hear back from her, though, I'll pass it along to everyone else here. to
Yeah,
take a look at.
so
But I think I captured it all. I also cleaned up, there was a lot of markup in the one that we had, because we've all been
It was
working on it,
so
so.
confusing.
I went through, and all the stuff that was like, well, this shouldn't be capitalized, I just accepted the change. Solar energy system, all lowercase, sure, whatever, don't care there. So the things that are left on it are really the kind of things that we need to work out between us and the trustees and figure out what's the best thing. So,
Okay, good.
yeah. So it is my fault that it took so long, but it's done.
So Carolyn has it at
Carolyn's got a copy of it.
her court at this point, okay.
Yep, and I'll reach out to her, I mean, yeah, I'll reach out to her at the end of the week or something like that and see, but yeah, we should, we'll have something to you soon.
Good.
That's my update. Next item on the agenda is the trustee report.
Who is the trustee?
Oh, gosh, I hope it wasn't me. Maybe,
I think it might have been Pat.
maybe it was Pat.
It was an organizational meeting, I know that.
Oh, it was the organizational meeting, that's right, so.
Was that you?
No, I don't think so, I think it was Pat, hang on a second, I'm gonna go look.
I wasn't there.
Jeez, oh, were you in,
Wasn't my time to watch him. You kind of thing.
how good to.
Oh, we have Kathleen.
Oh, I was just.
Where Suzanne is also on.
Would you like to report on the trustee meeting? Oh, Susan can.
Okay, basically, it was just an organizational meeting, there were 34 resolutions that were approved. Planning board members and terms, official newspaper, the journal, establishment of meeting dates and the official holidays for the year, rules of procedure, NICOM conference and other trainings. So 3 of the trustees, code and zoning, pay the bills before the audit, basically to avoid interest, salary compensation, and then all the appointments to the various committees and advisory groups. I can go through it if you want.
Oh, please don't.
Mileage reimbursement rate, and then 4 policies: procurement policy, investment, depository, the, used to be the trust company, Tompkins Community Bank.
Yes.
Capital asset policy, workplace violence policy, incident reporting. And then mayor's comments was a $5,000 grant for the Lansing Trails Bridge. Susan reported on the Cuba Lake Watershed Intermunicipal Organization. She sends the minutes to everyone. And also Carolyn is a member of the Trails, Tompkins County Trails Committee. She reported on the comprehensive plan meeting that Yamila and Susan Lustig and myself, we had the first meeting to basically set up a plan and go over the survey. And then next meeting is this Thursday at noon.
Business meeting.
That's pretty much it.
Right? It was Pat.
Lovely report.
Very nice.
That is the marathon meeting every year, that's right.
I know.
I had it last year. Okay, other business, Lorraine?
Do you have anything?
Yeah? No. Lisa? Jim, anything you want to bring up?
No.
Ellie?
Oh, my gosh.
Michael?
I'm even afraid to even say what's coming up, because nothing ever comes to fruition every time I do, but I have the.
It's given us time on the agenda to work on other stuff, so I mean.
Yeah, we're not complaining.
it's fun.
It's good.
Did have communication with the people from, that want to do the storage unit, the Moss parcel that has Dixon. I did also speak to the actual builder of the potential Taco Bell, so I would imagine both of those would be coming your way real soon.
Okay.
I will entertain then a motion to adjourn at 8:47 PM.
So moved.
By
Second.
Emil, second by Lisa, all in favor.
All right.
Thanks, everybody, thanks, Jim, thanks, Susan, thanks, Carly.